I'll introduce myself. My name is Joe Sudman, and I've been in this club for about a year and a half now. And Coop asked me if I would tie this fly tonight, and I said sure. This particular fly that I'm tying is called the Lord Carey, and it's just my own renovation of a. It stems from a Carey special, and anyway, there's probably 25 or 30 different ways of doing fly tying with different techniques, and everybody has a little different technique, and I've tried them all, and this is the way I tie this fly is what I've come up with, and I'll try to explain to you why I do the things that I'm doing, and it's all been through trial and error and a lot of process of elimination. But anyway, I'll start out here, and I'm going to take my glasses off because I can see much better without them. So one of the things that I start out here with is when I start this fly, right where I start this thread, this is where I want to end my material. And that stops me from crowding the eye of the fly so that I have plenty of room to tie the head of the fly. So that's my stopping point. So that's the reason where I'm tying this is the reason why that's there. So now I want to tie this tail in about maybe a 1/16 of an inch in front of the point of the hook. And this particular salmon fly hook has got quite of a radius in the shank of the hook, so it's kind of the characteristics of the hook. But I want to catch that tail right where the bend to the hook actually begins for the gap. So what I'm going to do is I'll actually try to hold this up so you can see what I'm doing, but I'm going to get some this golden pheasant tippet here and get it in some kind of a line here. Doesn't take too many of these fibers. You don't want it to be over pronounced. So I will take a soft turn here, a couple of soft turns, and then I'll gauge and see that that's a little long. I want it to try to keep it about the gap of the hook for the length of my tail, and that's kind of a standard distance, and that one looks pretty good. Actually, we need a little more than that. That's pretty sparse. We'll make it a little more pronounced. And one of the things I learned is if something doesn't fit right, take it out. Get another piece of material or whatever, and try to make the fly right as you tie it through, because you'll end up with something that you don't like when it comes to an end. Yeah, that's a little better. We'll tie that in, come back. I'm going to go underneath it once, twice. That helps the tail to stand up a little bit so it don't lay flat against the shank of the hook. Okay, now when I start fishing this fly, I use this peacock curl, and I was tying it in and twisting it and spinning it and putting it on, and these sea run, after you catch a couple of them, my fly was coming apart. This peacock curl is so delicate, and those sea runs, they have really aggressive teeth, so they really do a number on your fly. So you've got to tie them really durable, and I found that if I put a piece of brass wire in with this peacock curl before I spin it, it makes the peacock curl very, very durable. And well, it's not the perfect answer, but it makes a big difference. So I have this piece of very fine brass wire, and I will tie that in first. Tie it down, go back. Close enough. Now I picked five of these peacock curl stems, and 5 is just a number. It seems to be enough for the body. As I spin, it gives me the thickness that I want, but if you want to make it thicker or thinner or whatever, you know, it's up to the tires, whatever he wants to do. It's just happens to be this is the way I do it. So I will tie that peacock curl in here and get it all right down to where the feather was, or the tail was tied in. And then I'm going to wind this forward, and I want to come up just a little bit past the midpoint on the shank of the hook, and I'm going to put a half hitch in. And with this rotary vise and this type of hook, if you don't put that half hitch in, I guarantee you this thing will all come undone on you while you're tying. The thread, it peels it off with a thread post. So now I just kind of taken, this one is a short one, so we'll get him out of there. We'll tie these all. And this is a little tool I've had numerous hackle pliers. I've got them all sizes and shapes, and I still have most of them. But I discovered at Radio Shack, somebody, of course, told me about this, and it was used for soldering wires. And I see the fly shops all sell this stuff now. But when I found it, it was at the Radio Shack, and this thing really grabs, seems to hold firm, and it's just something that I've always used once I found it. So what I'm going to do is, and a little warning here, now whenever I cut this peacock curl or any of this stuff I'm going to be spinning, I have a piece of brass wire in here. So I want to go deep into my scissors, and I don't want to use the tips. I want to go clear to the back of the scissors before I cut this off, because you got that piece of brass wire in there. Definitely doesn't do your scissors any good, I'm sure. So now what we're going to do is we're going to spin this peacock curl. And this stuff is very, very delicate, and so you only want to spin get it so where it turns into a rope about 1 inch before. If you try to spin the whole thing, I guarantee you the fibers will start breaking on you as you wind it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try to get this thing started so that there's no thread showing. There we go. And as I wind this, I want to try to keep these turns as tight to the previous turn as I had, so that I get a real nice, tight, firm body. And I'll make a couple of turns. And now I need to spin this some more to get this curl to be tightened up. And we're going to be getting someplace close. Yeah, a little bit more yet. 1 turn, maybe more. Now, I'm going to do something here that some of you do, some of you don't. And the reason I do this is I want to tie this rope off on the bottom side of the shank of the hook. And the reason is I want that lump to be on the bottom and not on the top, because I'm going to add new material, and I want a clean surface when I add that material on there. So I'm going to take 3 turns. Now I'm going to roll this over, and once again, like I was saying, we want to go deep into the scissors when we cut this off. And I'll clean that out. Now what I'm going to do is, where this eye comes to the shank of the hook, there's a little bit of it's not symmetrical. So what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to put a few turns on this just to even that body up. So when I tie the next one on, all I'm doing is adding thread here for a filler to try to smooth that up to the transition to the eye. And that's enough. So now I'm going to take another piece of that wire, and I pre-cut these wires because Dean Childs told me about whenever you tie flies, try to have all this stuff prepared so that you don't have to bring things out and drop it on the floor and pick it up. And if you have all this stuff pre-made up for you, it makes it go a lot easier for you, and believe me, it really does. I really thank Dean for that. He's a guy that knows what he's talking about. So I'm going to tie this piece of wire in again, just like I did on the peacock curl. And we're going to take some ostrich. This is actually, it's called ostrich plume, but I use it as ostrich hurl. And I'm going to take 5 strands of that. Actually, I'm going to get one more, it's a little longer. When I tie things in, I always like to, when there are multiple strands of something, I always kind of like to take and I cut them off so that I have a sharp edge to tie in, and it's an even edge. Pieces aren't sticking out everywhere. It's those things come to bite you in the rear end later on. So now I'm going to tie this in. Let's get a little more of it here. Soft loop here. Right down to the peacock curl, and we go forward. And I want to stop this just a little bit shy of my starting point because that's the point I don't want to go past. So again, I'm going to put in a 1/2 hitch, and we're going to take this stuff and I'll comb it down here, fluff it down, and we're going to take our little device here, and I'm going to cut off and we're going to spin this one up. And this is the same thing as the peacock curl. This stuff is very delicate, and if you try to spin the whole thing, I'll guarantee you the fibers will break somewhere in the middle, and it's not what you want. So I will spin, get a couple of turns started here, and you can see that it's making a nice little piece of rope right in this section right through here. It's getting to be nice and tight. And now I'm going to spin that. What I try to do with this peacock curl is I make 2 turns and then I go back 1 turn over it because I want to try to get that thorax built up. So then I got 1 over that, and then I'll go 2 turns. I better put a couple more twists in here to get this tight. That looks pretty good. 1 more turn. We should be there. Okay, once again, I'm going to tie this off on the bottom. And I usually use 3 turns on almost all this stuff. It seems like 3 turns has always worked for me for holding materials is enough, as long as I keep them tight. Now, last time I turned this over, and I'm going to show you another trick for cutting this off. There's several different ways, and this was always kind of, I used to try to cut this off right here, and I would end up cutting the thread on my bobbin. And of course it drops to the floor and everything unspins, and then you become very happy again, and you get to take it all apart. So when I watch guys that are master tires, I watch lots of them, and what they did is they would take and put their finger out, lift it up, and then cut underneath. and then drop that back down. And that gets that thread out of the way and it's safe. So now I'm going to take a couple of turns. And now these are just pheasant rump feathers, and they're the same hackle that you use on a Carey special. They're the same type. And I'm going to tie them in wet. I prepared a bunch of them because every once in a while, halfway through the tie, it breaks on me, and so I prepared a couple of extras in case I have a boo-boo. So what I do is I take this thread, or this particular feather, and when I prepared these, I take a piece of a little drop of head cement and I put on there, and then I wipe it out, and that makes it easy for me to grab this tip when I'm tying it for a demonstration. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and cut a little bit of a tag off here, or leave a little bit of a tag, I should say. As you can see, this is what I'm going to tie in right there. And I like to leave a little bit of it so that I can actually get a half of a turn before the hackles start hackling on the shank. So we'll hope all goes well here. And I put a couple of soft turns in here, and now I can pull that feather down to where I want to place it so that I have some room. And if you can see, there's a little bit of a distance right here before where the fibers, the feather hackles start, and the quill of the feather. So I tie that off. Once again, I'm going to put a half hitch in here. If I don't do that, it's going to come unraveled. So now, instead of using spit, I've been advised when you do a demonstration is to use water. I usually wet my fingers when I do this, but just for, I use water to wet this down. And what we're going to do is we're going to take these hackles and we're going to start combing them back. And this is the wet style, for tying a wet style fly. And this, you just put enough water on them and they'll finally train right. And so now I'm going to wrap this hackle around. I try to get at least 3 turns, maybe 4. And as I do this, I want to get the next wrap as tight as I can against the previous wrap. And we'll come across here with the quill. And I've made a little device here out of a clothespin that I use to weight this so I can get my fingers and comb all this stuff back. And I'm going to tie that off. A couple of turns. And then I'm going to spin it over. And so I'm going to try to cut that just as close to the shank of the hook as I can so that I don't have any of it sticking out in the head of the fly. And now the last object here is to get a nice, small, tapered head. And then it's just a fly tier's choice. A lot of people don't spend much time on heads of flies, but that's always been one of my corpses. And when the fly is ended, it should have a nice, small, tapered head. And looks like we're going to be able to do that with this. And what I'm doing is I'm just trying to cover up material, the quill of the feather, and to get it nice and tight, and to have some kind of a taper to it. And that's about it. And I'll take 3 turns on that, whip finish turns. Now, the question's always been is how hard can you pull on this thread before you break it? And I've done many, many times of breaking thread because I just never knew where to stop. And again, by watching master guys that tie flies, and the common consensus is when you pull that down and when you can flex the shank of that hook, when it flexes, it's tight enough, leave it alone. That's why you put head cement on. So what I'm going to do is now I like to just roll this a little bit to try to get it to train to lay back, because I don't want them sticking out a lot. I want them in the backward motion. The picture of that fly I tied, I pulled the hackles up to the top and then I pulled some hackles to the bottom just so you could see the bottom, the body and the thorax, the difference, so it showed good instead of being half covered up with hackle. But this guy is done now, and what I use this Sally Hansen's nail hardener. You can buy it numerous places. It's easy to come by, and it's for ladies that paint clear on their fingernails, and it comes with a little paintbrush. And when I open it up, that's the first thing I take out and throw it away. You don't want to try to paint the head of your fly with that paintbrush. You'll have way too much. You've got to put that on with your bodkin. And I just get a little small dot, and with a rotary vise you just put it on there, and then you just turn it around until you get it completely covered. All the thread is, and it takes about 15 minutes to a half an hour for that thread to saturate that, or the nail hardener to saturate that thread. And then it becomes, it's kind of your first layer. And I like to put 3 coats on, and then after that's set up for a while, then I'll put the second coat on. Then I put the last coat on the next day. And what it does is, with 3 coats on there, it makes it, when it's all finished, it looks like it's a little red bead on the head of your fly. And it's just something that I do. It's not necessary. I'm sure the fish could probably care less, but it's just when I tie these flies, I spend a lot of time trying to learn how to tie flies, and my goal is to try to tie flies that really look good. And when you're around people that are familiar with flies, they look at, it's either a good fly or it's a bad fly. It's just that simple, So I always try to tie flies that are good, but that's just me. Anyway, I spin this around a little bit because spinning it will even that Sally Hansen's out. It takes about a minute before it finally gels, and then it'll dry in an even portion around that eye. And that's it.